And we're back with me, Johnny McMurray, on the On the Spot Football podcast with yet another fantastic guest. It's good to be back after a couple of weeks. This guy is easily the best guest we've had on. Definitely the best looking guest we've had on. Not to put that out there to anyone. Fresh out of retirement, 2 years and close to 800 games in the league. It's a pleasure, Mr. Sean Ward. Sean?
Tommy, you've humbled me there. I wouldn't go as far as say I watched the show. I think it's magnificent. I think it's great. I think the range of guests that you have is superb. So I certainly wouldn't.
Well, at least you know there. You're literally sitting at the top there in terms of looks. Do you know what I mean?
Well, Gary Hunt will argue with me there. You know,
he's got that luscious hair. Do you know what I mean? He combs it back and all.
He's the charm.
Swagger. He had his wee cig and all, and
yeah,
he was very chilled, very chilled. But listen here, thank you so much for giving me your time. I've been torturing you for a couple of weeks now to get you on, and I know you're on holiday. I was on holiday, bits and pieces, but so excited. You're easily. He's sorry to jump in there, but you're easily the most eccentric guest we've had on. Close to 800 appearances in the league is wild, should I say? Wild.
Yeah, it's I had a great career, very, very fortunate. And when I reflect back on it, you know, how lucky was I? You look at the players that I played with, you look at the managers that I played under.
Yeah.
You know, for somebody that came probably from a background that wasn't overly familiar with the Irish League, it's absolutely my league now.
Yeah.
It's something that I spent so much time in, I invested so much energy into, as we all do.
Yeah.
And I love the Irish League.
Mate, it's so different now, I think, probably from when you started way, way back. I mean, 22 years ago now, but to be in the league 22 years, I'm feeling it now. I think I've only been in it 10 years, no knees, and you somehow still look so fit, so lean. There must be something in the water.
I'm talking about fortune too, and the league is in a much better place now than it probably ever has been. Teams are competing better in Europe. The type of player, the net is much bigger and much more vast, and the type of players that's coming here. And now clubs are full time. And I sort of think, you know, if that had happened maybe 10, 15 years ago, would I have had the success that I had? Because, you know, I was always a part-time footballer, and even though it's never part-time, you're always really full-time. I was a school teacher first and foremost, and then a footballer after that. So, you know, I know that some players, and Matthew Fitzpatrick has taken the example on the break off. So I think, you know, would I have taken the break of playing football? And if that was the case, then I probably wouldn't have played for the Linfields and the Glentorans and the top teams that are dominating and doing so well. So it probably worked in my favour that I got the longevity out of a part-time game, essentially.
Yeah. Would you think that if that was the option now, would you take it up? Would you go full-time?
Well, I don't know. Probably, well, if I go by experiences, the answer is no. I remember back when I was just finishing the PGC, Stephen Kenny contacted me about going to Derrysay, and I wouldn't give it up. I wouldn't give up teaching. At that time, he asked me again at other clubs. The only one he didn't offer me was when he was at Dunfermline, which is probably the only one I would have went to. But back then, no. I wanted to teach. I wanted to play football. I wanted to be able to have the luxury of doing both.
Yeah.
So in that regard, it worked in my favour. That's what I'm saying now. Back then, if it were to happen, no, I'm happy with how my career panned out. You know, I'm very fortunate, and I think I've done okay.
You got to consider the fact that you've spanned over 22 years. You've played for the biggest clubs in the league over that period. Not many people will ever play games in Europe, never mind get close to 800 games. So you're probably sitting, if there was a bracket of like Hall of Fame in terms of playing in the league, you would definitely be entering that, I think.
It's not for me to say. It's for others. But there's players that came way before me that have played more games and have had, you know, certainly, you know, in the medal count, you know, more. But I'm very happy with how my career went. Yes, we're all greedy, and in that regard, we're all selfish, and we always want more. You know, I wish I had played more games. I wish I had won more trophies. I wish I had more success. But Europe again, for me, you know, I used to joke, you know, I don't do preliminary rounds, you know, because I never first days, because that was always the time that I went you know, on holiday. And I always remember Matthew Tipton and I having a wee spat on social media where he questioned professionalism of us for taking that wee break. And Tippy had come from a full-time game, and we were part-time, but we kissed and made up.
Yeah.
It's coming from a full-time job into that environment of where there is the 2 full-time jobs, and they're 2 very, very commitment. Right now, where I am is, I'm happy enough to be on a break from football. It's great that I dip in and I have the opportunity to do some other work, which keeps me involved in the league. But we don't do things half-heartedly. Everything is 100% intensity. It's go, go, go. I'll not say I don't have the time for it, because if it's something that I want to do, I'll make the time for it, and I'll make it fit. But it's just the way it goes. It's you want to be 100%er, and sometimes at this stage now I'm not ready to be 100%er on something else.
What I want to talk to you about is your job as a teacher gives you a lot of freedom in terms of certain times of the year, and a lot of the students that you teach will obviously know who Sean Ward is playing in the league, and it's probably something that they want to do. But do you feel that you're able to help guide them in a positive way to trying to get there in terms of PE lessons or coaching, or just trying to get those kids in the right frame of mind of what it actually takes, considering you were like the ultimate pro? You're probably the best person that they can learn from in that regard. But do you think that it's more difficult nowadays with technology and playing games and the kids not being in the street as such, whereas probably growing up for you it was, let's go out to the street, let's play football, let's be out there 24/7, let's kick the ball around?
I think going back to, well, I'm still relatively young, I'm 41. I can still remember being in the street with friends in my street, and we would have played it with a gable wall out the side of my house. And it was actually quite funny. There's no ball game sign.
I remember those. I remember.
And it was my house. And at times we used to joke, and we used to kick the ball off the wall and run, because my dad used to hate the chases. So I was involved in the kick the ball off the wall and then run.
You're the first one away.
We had a number of gable walls, but I remember out in the street playing, and it was just make-up scenarios. I remember my friend being Yuri Djorkaeff, and I was Ronaldo, and it was the 2 of us running about the street, passing each other and dummied each other and scoring goals and running away and celebrating, and it was great. I'm not saying it doesn't happen anymore. There's certainly a lot more opportunity where it's a lot more structured.
Yes.
But going back to the part of being a teacher, I love my job. I do. I love the position that I have. I love working in the school that I'm in. It's an absolutely magnificent school with magnificent staff and brilliant kids. Like all teachers, the fundamental principle is that we want to try and make a difference. We want to try and pass on something. We want to educate people so that they have better opportunities in life, that they can make better decisions. So ultimately, that's what we want to do. From a football perspective, I take teams. Sometimes they listen, sometimes they don't listen. Doesn't mean that I'm always right. But that's a part of learning. I learn off them, they learn off me. If there's ever anything difficult that they have a question or concern about, I would like to think that they could come and speak to me about it.
Yeah.
But my school is in Crusaders, and when I did finish, I was at Glenavon, so a lot of the kids would have been very familiar with me playing football, and it's always a great conversation starter.
It is.
In talking to kids and asking them to go to the games, and we had quite a lot of kids that would have went to the games and out in the playground having conversations, having chats. And it's a great way of building relationships, because as a teacher, that is where the majority of the growth starts in all forms of learning, which is relationships that you're able to build with young people.
I want to take you right back. So, following the podcast and following the gist of what we do here, I want people to be able to understand who Sean Ward is. So from that little snippet, we know that you're a teacher and you've had an incredible career, which we're going to dive into in probably a lot more detail. But where did it all begin for you? And how did it all begin for you? What made you pick football? Was there any other sports?
Yeah, well my family's traditionally Gaelic football. My dad hurling. My dad's a big fan of hurling. My club, Sarsfields in Belfast, and I always played Gaelic football. I always played hurling when I was younger. I played handball in my school. I went to Good Shepherd Primary School, which was, had brilliant role models there. Brian McAlea, Jim Lee, they were brilliant. So and this will be pretty much the line the whole way through, is that I'm very lucky to have really good, positive role models. Yeah. I was in a great school in Good Shepherd, which is Poglass. That's where I grew up. Mm-hmm. I grew up in Poglass. My family were involved in sport. My dad was a Sarsfields man. I played Gaelic football my whole time. So I would have done athletics in school. My school was very proactive in giving kids the opportunity to being physically active. I I remember I was probably about 7 or 8, and this is when you talk about people who have impacts on cultures and society, and particularly where we are, where we've sort of grown out of well, you like to think we've grown out of a moment of conflict,
Yes.
and where we find ourselves. There's no way of escaping where we are. But my first team was Belfast Youth, and Belfast Youth was formed by 2 brilliant men in John Flood and Victor McCracken.
Okay.
And John Flood was Celtic Boys, and Victor McCracken was St Andrews in the Shankill, and they would have competed in the Holland Cup. And then them two just had this idea, well, that I believe, and I'm sorry if I miss others out, but they had the idea to create this team called Belfast Youth. And John Flood was a family friend. We used to have a caravan down in Bundoran, and we would have went down there. And that was the first team that I ever played for. And it was a cross-community team of people from East Belfast, from the Shankill, from Poglass, from Andersonstown, from the west, the east, the north.
Yeah.
And that was my first introduction into football and soccer. And then obviously with the school. So I would have played football, I would have played Gaelic, I would have played hurling, I would have played handball, and Belfast Youth was my first club, and it was a great time. I loved it. I was playing with my friends, I was playing with people that I didn't know, and that was my first real introduction into football. And then from that, I then had an opportunity to go to St Andrews, and that's when things sort of started changing. I never chose anything. The only time I really chose soccer over Gaelic football was probably when I signed for Glentoran, signed professionally for Glentoran.
Okay.
And sometimes I would have sort of sneaked off on a Sunday and played. Yeah. But I remember my mum from West Belfast, my dad's from West Belfast, from where we're from. And they're the most remarkable people that I've ever met. In a world of selfish, they are completely selfless. They grew up where they are. They have their own beliefs and opinions. They never interfered in anything that I did. Everything was always about being supportive.
Yeah.
And I remember we went to, there used to be a residential up in Coleraine. It was like a Northern Ireland residential. And before that there was a provincial. So I would have played for Lisburn. Lisburn was our district team. And used to go to Jordanstown, stay in the digs and played this tournament. And it was amazing. It was incredible. And then some players got the opportunity to go to Coleraine, and I went to Coleraine. Davy McAlinden was there, and a couple of other players were there, Jim McManaman, and I wanted to go to St Andrews because St Andrews were the team.
Yeah.
And I remember Joe Kincaid saying, I'd love to go. I was 10, so that was 1994. Coming around the
time. I was just born then.
Coming in the times, but that was around about the times of the ceasefire and things like that. So it was a very, very nervy time. And I'm saying, yes, I want to go and play for St Andrews. But St Andrews trained in the Hammer and the Shankill. Yeah. Which, for a Celtic in West Belfast, and St Andrews always had a tradition of just being an inclusive club.
Yes.
In my opinion. And I think most people would have that opinion. And I remember Joe Kincaid phoning the house, and I answered the phone, and I was saying, yes, I'm going to play for St Andrews. And he was going, okay, well, who are they? And I'll take the phone. And my dad to me was like, okay, let's do it.
Yeah.
Don't know if that was the same conversation with my mum at home, because it's God, what's going on here?
That's the conflict.
West Belfast going into the Shankill, but we went and we travelled everywhere, and we had a really good side, and we were so well looked after, and we made so many really good friends. Don Sims, for example, was one of the best friends. Johnny and I started off at Belfast Youth, and Johnny Sims, and for some of there. Johnny was a young lad who was a remarkable footballer, and Johnny in 2001, contracted for Jerry and CJD, which was what some people know as Mad Disease.
Okay.
And we went right through. So we were at Belfast Youth together. We were at St Andrews. We then went to Shankill. We went to Glentoran, and we became really good family friends. Johnny was a massive Rangers fan, massive Chelsea fan. Would have phoned my dad up when Rangers had to beat Celtic, and not what we were big Celtic fans, but that was the crack, that was the banter, and we were really good friends. And Johnny was brilliant, and he contracted this in 2001, and I remember him coming to Glentoran, and just coordination and things were off. But he fought for 10 years, 2011, and he passed away. But those little connections that we have is what football is all about.
Yeah.
And I love St Andrews, and Don then took me on the Shankill and then Glentoran, and I had a number of spells, and sometimes the Glentoran fans give me a bit of a hard time by calling me a journeyman. Right, okay. And it sort of winds me up. So going 4 clubs in 22 years isn't that bad.
Well, considering the majority of it was at the one club. But
yes, but if I'm going back when I was a kid, I had about 5 clubs in a short period.
So that doesn't count.
It doesn't. But But I went there. I went at a spell in Lisburn Youth. At 2 years under 14, I sort of fizzled out a wee bit in football. Sort of lost my way a wee bit. Not culture. I was always a good player as such. But I just lost the love of sport, and I was very lucky in that I got 2 cracks at under 14, and then that's when things sort of started changing. I started doing a wee bit better.
Yeah. One thing that's reoccurred in the podcast the most is Mr. Kincaid and St Andrews, and how well organised it was for a small local team.
Mm-hmm.
And the players it produced is phenomenal. And I don't know of any club like that at the minute that does the same thing, because a lot of clubs are just cherry picking. I think in maybe the likes of Larne or Crusaders, and they all want the best players at younger age groups, and none of these so-called like lesser clubs, the likes of Rosario or these different things, are able to do that anymore, because it's very focused on we need the best players from a young age, whereas St Andrews kind of stood by itself from what it seemed like. It was if you sort of recollect on the players that played for St Andrews that went on and were kept at full international level. Now the team that Davy McAlinden was on not that long ago, and Davy spoke about our team, and really there was one player in our team that went across the water, and that was Ricky McElvenna, who went to Rangers. But St Andrews was such a club that cast its net so far and wide. Yeah. We had players from all over Northern Ireland, with players in Derry, with players from Fermanagh, with players from everywhere, and that's where you create really good friendships. But at the same time, when I remember when I worked in Corpus Christi before I worked where I was, I remember we had 4 full senior internationals from West Belfast in the 1 year. Yeah. You had Carl Winchester, you had Kevin Braniff, you had Sammy Clingan, the one that Meg O'Connor. Yeah. You had 4 internationals in Northern Ireland at the one time. So, but yes, you're absolutely right. Icefield would probably say the same, that they've a big tradition. LaSalle, Boys Model, they've always had a conveyor belt of talent. But that was the good thing about St Andrews, was that it was like an inclusive club in an environment which is very indigenous, but they treated us so well, and I loved it there. Now, I found it very difficult towards the end, and you see now where parents are very much involved when kids are playing. You get a lot of parents that, in my opinion, probably interfere. And really interfere. My dad never interfered, and I had a difficult time at St Andrews, because everybody has to play, and I remember every game I was taken off every game. Yeah. To the point that where the sub was being made, I used to just get my head down and just walk towards the end. Because you knew it was. And it was tough. Moment. And it was tough. But those little moments when you reflect back, they're character builders, their resilience. Yes, as a child you don't understand that. My dad never had a conversation, but there's 3, 4, 5 other players that want game time too, So it's difficult for coaches. It's very difficult for volunteers. It's hard to be critical of a volunteer, because they're doing their best to give up their time to give everybody the opportunity to try and play football. See, before you make the move to Glens, was there ever a stage where your dad sat you down and said, "Sean, I want you to go into hurling. I want you to go into Gaelic"?
Never.
Do you reckon he wanted you to?
No. It's just, was I happy? What was I happy with?
Were you better at football?
He would say I was better at Gaelic football.
Yeah.
He would say I was. Don't know whether I was or not, but I loved playing both. Yeah. I loved playing both. But then it came to the point where I was at Glentoran and I was on a professional contract, and it just had to stop. So it was just the way that it found itself.
Yeah.
But he was always, would have said in every single contract negotiation when I was younger. So I up to the Glentoran, never interfered.
Yeah.
Never interfered. And there was times when, and I look back now and I go, if that happened to me now, I wouldn't have accepted it.
Yeah.
But he sat back and he let me make my own decision, and he travelled with me everywhere. We had the best experiences ever, as many family members do. We travelled everywhere. And again, to talk about selfless, that's what they do. They give that up for you to embark on something, and I just loved it. I loved playing sport, and he backed it, and he went with it, and he achieved it with me.
Yeah, which is probably one of the nicest things looking back on, that you had that together.
Well, it wouldn't have happened. I wouldn't have been able to go to St Andrews. I wouldn't have been able to go to the Shankill. I wouldn't have been able to go to Glentoran in the early days without it.
I don't think people understand how much is sacrificed by parents. I think that especially now, the travelling that people will commute to go to these so-called bigger clubs, and most of the time your parents are just sitting in the car waiting for you to finish to go back. I know my dad sits here and he doesn't have a pick about football and never did, and he couldn't tell you an offside rule, to be honest, but he drove me, probably pretended he could read the newspaper, sat in the car, waited for you, picked you up, brought you home. That was you done. So I think there's probably a lot more credit needs to go into parents, but the other side of it is, you just touched on, is a lot of parents think that they know the game and then they want to interfere in the kids' games, and I think that's a terrible shit.
No, when I think about my time playing football, I never think about the conversations after games. I've no doubt that they happened.
Yeah.
But when I'm travelling to games, it's funny. I remember when I was playing, the things that were vivid for me was we played in the Lisburn League.
Mm-hmm.
We used to travel home. We used to go and see my granddad, who was in Twinbrook at the time. We would have got a wee fry, went home, had the fry. I remember travelling to games, and my wife gives me a hard time on my taste of music, but we used to listen to James Taylor. Fire and Rain. We used to listen to Chris Christopherson, and that's the memories that I have. Traveling to games is the music that we're playing. I remember Roy Coleman. I used to drive a white Mercedes, and he used to slag the big white Merc and things like that. But I see it was just you go and do your thing, and when you need my support's there, and it was always there.
You make your move to Glens. I think you signed for Glens in 2000. Stroke of the millennium. You ended up there for 13 years. Talk to me how big of a moment that was for you, getting that contract with the Glens, and how it spanned out for you across the 13 years.
Well, it's strange because I wasn't a big Irish League fan. And my first time going to Glentoran was from Shankill. And again, we talked about Simsey. It was Simsey and I, we went and we played in a tournament for Glentoran at the Grove. And we were 15 at the time. And I remember, and this is again when you're talking about the impact that people have on you, sometimes it just takes somebody to have belief in you.
Yeah.
And I had that at Glentoran, and that's why I'll always be so fond of the club, even though things have happened, but I'll always be so fond of the club because of how things went. But I remember Stephen Lowry was our coach under 15. Stephen Lowry and Roy McGee, two absolutely magnificent men who I would absolutely credit for starting my trajectory in Irish League football. Okay. But I remember when I turned up, Stephen Lowry said to me, "Have you ever played sweeper before?" And I says, "Well, yeah." And he says, "Well, just play it like Noel Bailey." And I didn't know who Noel Bailey was. I hadn't a clue who Noel Bailey was. So I just run about just covering people, not marking anybody. I was small. And then I signed, and then I went under 15, and then I went under 16. He was there. Davy Taylor was under 17, 18, and then I got opportunities for reserves. But back then, the reserve teams were very, very different than what they are now. Mm-hmm. The Glentoran reserve team at that time was a team that would have
challenged for like,
not top six. Yeah, I know it's easy to say that, and you don't know how things would have panned out. But with Scott Young was coming back from injury, Nevin Wootsies was there, Marty Hunter, Michael Holliday, Darren Fitzgerald, Tim McCann at times, Neil Armstrong, goalkeeper. Then you myself. Sometimes I didn't get on because the first team players always take the president. Jason Hill, Damien McLaughlin, it was Conor Walsh. It was a very difficult team to get into. And then that's when I had Davy Taylor, the under 18s, and then again other people, Geordie Bowden, Johnny Jamison, Norman Tenahan, Philip Stevenson. They had so much belief in me. And back then, Glentoran didn't throw out professional contracts. Roy Coyle, as a manager, did not fire out professional contracts to young players. And I remember when I got the first professional contract, there was myself, there was Damien McLaughlin, and there was Jason Hill. And they were a lot older than me. So they would have took the president. So they got their 2-year deals. And I remember it came to me, and Chris Morgan became available. And I remember Tom Dick coming to me and saying, "Sean, we want you to stay, but we can't pay you because all the money was going to Chris Morgan."
Yeah, okay.
Who had just scored 2 in an Irish Cup final, who was an absolute Irish League legend. I was going, right, okay. So I remember the first time we were getting a photograph taken, and Roy Coyle says to me, "Listen, we want you in the photograph, but you go upstairs and you speak to him." He didn't take any involvement with the contract negotiations. He says, "Go upstairs, speak to him. If you come down, you sign, you're in the photograph, great. If not, then listen, best of luck to you."
Yeah.
And my dad came in, and we went upstairs, and Tom Dick was the chief executive at the time, and he says to me, and this is when I reflect back, if that happened to me now, I certainly might not have reacted as I did.
Yeah.
but I'm glad I'm not me now.
Okay, fair.
Because everything could have changed.
Yes.
Everything might not have been as it worked out. But I remember I went up and he says to me, Sean, we can't pay you. And I was on brown envelope.
Yeah.
I was on 30 quid. £7.50 you got for a reserve game. So sometimes I was getting 45 quid a week.
Yeah.
To go into nothing. So he says to me, Sean, we can't pay you because we've used our budget. So you'll be getting nothing. But what we'll do is we'll give you a 3-year deal. First year is as an amateur, the next 2 years we'll make up the wage that we can't pay you.
Fair.
Now, you can go, and I know you can go to Bangor or you can go to Lauren. That was the words. And I thought, I don't want to leave. I don't want to leave because I don't want to be somebody that was released or that there wasn't something there for.
Yeah.
And my dad was there and he said nothing. And he was probably really angry.
Yeah.
And the way how it went. But I signed and I got into the first team that Christmas. Supposed to play the Stephen Sons Cup final against Bangor and something happened. Roy Coyle says to me, no, you're playing Boxing Day. So I played Boxing Day and then that was it. We went on, we won the league. Won the league. My first I made my debut in 2002 and I would have played a couple of games and that was the end of that year where Glentoran nearly won the clean sweep.
Yeah.
They lost the Irish Cup final and that was because they put the likes of myself, Chris Pike, Stuart Long, Jason Hill. We played those last 2 or 3 games and the players didn't. Yeah. So they blame us for why they didn't the clean sweep. But it worked out.
Yeah.
It worked out. So didn't get a bonus, didn't get paid, but got the medal.
See, whenever you talk about that Boxing Day, that opportunity for you to go and play Steel & Sons, which is a big game, right? So Glenn's reserves are in the Steel & Sons, and then you've got Linfield and Boxing Day. And he comes to you and he says, Sean, you're not playing Steel & Sons. You're playing against Linfield. What are you thinking? Like, you're going to start against Linfield on Boxing Day. Surely your heart's going,
at that time I was probably going, can I play both?
Yeah. You probably were sitting up.
Want to play?
I wouldn't be able to do that. I'd be full of turkey.
But then you would have. But back then you just wanted to play football. I just wanted to play every single game. But obviously I'm there because I want to play senior football. I want to play for the first team. I want to be in around that changing room. Because that was an amazing changing room. So many strong characters. You know, Mark Glendenning, who became my Irish League hero. Yeah. Because of how he was and the standards that he set. He totally changed my view towards training. I remember I went away to Florida for 3 weeks. And in Florida, you're walking about Universal Studios eating a turkey leg, which is about this size. And I'm coming back, and we're running the hills of Ballyneal, and I had to stop. Yeah. And I had to stop. And I remember they completely held you to account. They told us, disgrace. You're 19. 18, 19. You should disgrace. You're in the shower and they're pinching inches and you're going, but that's senior players holding you to account. And then you sort of go, right, something has to change. Yeah. And then that flipped my mindset into how I had to prepare for games because I wasn't as talented as others, but I knew that if I was as fit and I prepared as well, then I had as good a chance. But you'd Sass, you'd Gary Smith, you'd Colin Nixon, you'd Chris Walker, you'd Meg O'Neill actually was in the 2003 team. Very, very lucky to be around such senior players who were big characters, and they certainly framed my mindset of how I prepared and went through my career.
See, the way you talk about Mr. Glendenning there, was he the one who was in front of you, stopping you playing regularly whenever you first signed, or who was playing back at that stage?
Colin Nixon. Colin Nixon, but I went into the team as a midfielder. Okay. I went in the team at right midfield, and then I played left midfield, and I would have played in front of Nicky. I always had pace. I was always honest. I always tracked back. The day that they talk about Morgan Day, if you watch the video, remember we watched it in the Strand Cinema at one point, and I must have got to the byline about 20 times and kicked the ball out of play 20 times. So I was up and down the wing and I stopped other people playing, but I didn't create much. But I was playing in front of Colin Nixon, and Colin Nixon, it's very similar to Michael Galt last week. 2 players in this world that never had a bad game. Yeah. And that was Colin Nixon and Michael Galt, who told you. I remember Colin Nixon was one of the greatest Irish League players that ever played the game. And he was so funny. He was so talented. He was so good. But I remember once we were playing, Davy McClellan talked about last week about Coleraine when they absolutely tanked us and Roy Patterson scores. And I remember Gary McCutcheon doing something very similar, and Nicky comes in at half time, and Nicky's probably marking Rory Patterson, as probably am I, and Gary McCutcheon. 2 of us are still making no impact, and Nicky comes in and hammers everybody and goes, "You are making me look bad, you know. And that's the way he was. He never had it. It's always everybody else's fault. And God, he was the same.
Yeah.
But
there's a lot of people like that now, to be
yeah,
honest.
yeah. I actually went into that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I ran the show every week. Didn't make a difference.
But then you could do that. You were all right. I think when towards the end, I hated it at times because you've touched on there how you were so versatile, and I think that's probably the longevity of your career. You've probably played way more games in different areas because you could do that, whereas most people can't. And one of the areas that I hated playing against you in was whenever you dropped into sweeping, because you'd give me 4 or 5 yards to do whatever I wanted, and you just ended up taking the ball off me most times. And it was probably one of the best positions that I had seen you in, personally. I loved it when you played right back because you kind of got lost. I was loving it because I dragged you out there and I was okay. But whenever you played straight back, I hated it. I remember Glenavon Crusaders just before you finished, and I was like, fuck, I hate this. And I knew it was a tough day coming up. Like,
no, there were many days where I struggled, but versatility, in my opinion, was always a good thing because I always had the freedom to play in different positions, and I always felt that I tried to play the positions that I did as that position should be played.
Yeah.
You know, and I understand same time a lot of managers probably never wanted me to play centrally, defensively, because I was 11.5 stone. You know, at 12 stone up at my peak. I was 5'9", 5'10". I wasn't dominant. I learned very, very, very quickly. I remember playing against Paul Brown, who was a big 6'2", a Korean at the time, or Linfield, and he just bullied me. And I tried to wrestle. So I learned very, very quickly that I'm not a wrestler.
Yeah.
I rely on other attributes that I have. But yeah, I played left midfield, I played right midfield, I played centre midfield. I played left back, right back. I could play with both feet. But those things, you know, you work at them. You put yourself in a position where you're able to do that, and then you have the trust and the backing of others to put you there, and you just hope that you can do that for the team. You know, I would always say, and I would always joke, you know, I'm best player the Irish League ever had. You know, the Galty. He'll tell me I am. You know, and he'll say, and that's a joke, by the way. But you know, it's you want to be the best. You want to be the best as you possibly can. But ultimately, when you reflect back, you know, I became a role player. I wasn't the star of many teams, but I had a role within a team, and that's a part of being in a team, is that you do it for the collective good of everybody. And I had never any problem playing wherever I was asked to play, because the biggest strength of being versatile at that time was that you played.
See, whenever you talk about being versatile at that time, do you think that having the backing of the players at that stage, like as you've touched on, that Glentoran team was full of legends. They must have been able to help guide you in certain areas where they knew that it would obviously ultimately probably benefited them for you to do the donkey work or running here, there and everywhere, and they could probably move you and put you into positions that would ultimately help them. But having that guidance from the likes of Colin Nixon or Mr. Glendenning, I was going to say Reece Glendenning, but Mr. Glendenning, or that would benefit you going forward at such a young age.
It did, because it was very ruthless. You know, it was, if you made a mistake, you knew you made a mistake, and you had to learn very quickly. And I was 39, 40 and still learning. They were just very, very good footballers who knew their role. And it was weird, because I remember we used to get to shoot in the Match magazine. When I was 18, 19, get to shoot in the Match magazine. Don't even know the shoot in the Match magazine. But they used to do a wee magazine called Jags Trading, and I used to come in and Sass used to say to me, get me boots, and I used to get Sass boots, you know, like a wee fool. And I used to feel buzzing that I was getting Martin and Danning's boots. You know, like, paid me for them. Don't get me wrong, paid me for them. But I just held those players in such high esteem. And I knew my place. You know, they were senior players. I came into a team. I'm not at the same party of them. I understand that changes now. But I felt that I was very humble. And anything that they would have said, I'd have taken on board and I'd listened to it. And I wouldn't have swore back to them. Obviously, when I get 23, 24, I start to believe my own hype, and then I start to chirp back. But
you've got experience at that stage yourself where you can have that conversation.
Yeah. But the thing was, I held those people in such high esteem, and they were brilliant for me and brilliant with me.
Not to jump too far ahead, but you finished playing there at 40. And they were all senior pros at that stage with you, and as you've touched on, you're very humble in terms of how you approach the game and taking stuff on board. Do you feel that there was a difference whenever you were a kid to the kids now, and then you being the senior player?
Well, I was 40 and still probably behaving like a 22-year-old.
Fair enough.
So it
doesn't matter.
I probably wasn't the senior pro that they probably looked up to.
Yeah.
You know, I was the one that was having the crack.
Yeah.
You know, and that was my happy place. You know, football at that time was my happy place. So yes, I totally get your point. You know, young boys come in, and one thing that I think a lot of them lack is patience. And they want everything yesterday. You know, I made my debut in 2002. But it wasn't until 2004, 2005 that I established myself in the first team. And it wasn't even until 2005, 2006 that I was a proper first team regular.
Yeah.
I had 3 games in 2002. I made my debut against Glebe Rangers in the County Shield. I played the last 2 games of the season. The next year, I think I was on the bench a couple of times, maybe played 3 or 4 games. Then the next year, probably the same. I don't think players are prepared to wait.
Yeah, they want to play.
They want to play. And they've every right and they've every entitlement. I wouldn't change my path because my path gave me what it gave me.
Yeah.
It worked out. I just think players need to be a wee bit more patient. And sometimes, I'm not saying people are being poorly advised, but just be patient. You know, work hard, be honest in your reflection. You know, look at where you are, try to improve, try and be better. It's easy to say society's changed, but we're partly responsible for that because we're the ones that are facilitating it.
Yeah.
You know, we want people to have a voice. We want people to be able to speak their opinion and articulate their opinions. And then when they do it, we criticise them for it. So, and then that's the, you know, when you talk about the types of management structures that are in place. And I was watching the Birmingham, the Tom Brady one.
Yes.
Where he talks about 2 different types of managers. He talks about a transactional coach and a transformational coach. And every coach will be a transactional coach because they want to win.
Yeah.
And that's what they're judged on. They need to win. They need to create players. They need revenue. They need success. But then you'll have those managers that are transformational. They're the ones that will impact your life, not just on a football field, but as a person.
Yeah.
And I had people like that. You know, I had people who you could go and speak to. You know, it was never, you know, there was conflict, but it was always respectful conflict.
Yeah.
And that's part of the thing. You know, it's how you deliver the message, how you hear the message, and how you respond to the message.
One thing that I've touched on probably over the podcast is a lot of people probably that I've had in certain managers, which probably you've had too at the same time, that I found hard having the conversation with, and I felt like they didn't ultimately, probably they weren't more people person.
Mm-hmm.
Probably the best way to say it is I would be, whereas I just want to have that conversation. You tell me exactly what you need or what you want. And I struggled probably towards the end of my, well, probably not the end, I haven't fully killed the boat there, like, but I just struggled having conversations with certain managers in the league because I thought that maybe they were just too straight focused on what they perceive you as what you should be. And once you've touched on there, I think you're 100% right that there's 2 types, and we'll probably find a balance between both of those is probably the best ultimatum there.
You'll have some managers you challenge and you'll probably not play again.
Yeah.
And I didn't challenge many. I was probably too cowardly.
No, I did, and that's why I ended up probably bench rocking for a long time.
But then you get managers, and you know, Michael spoke about it, you know, last week. You know, who turns up to a Christmas party, knocks over the Christmas tree, belittles every other senior pro and tells the manager I should be playing,
yeah,
and then plays.
Yeah.
You know, so that's one way of dealing with something, and it takes a very strong character to go right. You know what? You know, I'm gonna you know, show me.
But then again, that probably describes their personality as people.
Yeah.
But then again, I've had conversations with the same people outside of football, and they're the nicest people. It's just when you're in that setup, everything changes. As you say, it's probably dependent on winning games, or they're obviously stressed because they need to deliver on the Saturday and it's not, then the last thing they need is probably certain people chirping in their ear. But as you've touched on there, I think David's relationship with most people is very different than most managers will probably ever have with players.
But Johnny, language is very, very powerful. And if you want to go in and have a conversation, in my opinion, and you want to go in and have a conversation with somebody, then you have to be prepared to hear what you don't want to hear.
Absolutely.
And at the same time, when you will have a conversation with somebody that's really honest, you hope that there's never a grudge that's held.
Yes.
And I remember one of the only real conversations that I had with managers was probably Eddie Patterson. And when I reflect back on my time, Eddie Patterson is one of the best. One of the best because of what he produced when he was at Glentoran, and I get on great with him, and I think he was brilliant. But I remember being unhappy with him because he took the captaincy off me. He took the captaincy off me over when we went through the whole wages issue.
Yes.
which was at Glentoran, and it was because we were having meeting after meeting after meeting, and we were having another meeting because payments weren't coming. And at that point, I had said, no, there's no point in having a meeting, let's just leave. So I left the changing room.
Yeah.
And he challenged my leadership, and he had every right to. And he's probably right at that time, because I just wanted to go out and train at that time. There was never a grudge. I played. He knew that I was leaving at the end of the year, even though it wasn't done, continued to play me. It was respectful. He as the manager had to make a decision, had to show something, and he did it. And it was probably for the better of the team. And I have absolutely no problem with that. I would like to think I had good relationships with the managers that I played under. Some didn't play me, but that happens to everybody. You will go through a spell where you're not playing, and like us all, we're competitors. We all think we should be playing.
Yeah.
But more often than not, they're respectful, and as long as they're respectful, and then you feel that there is still a chance that I can play, I'm just not playing because of a reason, then I'm okay with that.
Across that 13 years, you had a couple of managers at the Glens. So you've touched on there that Roy Coyle was probably the first. Eddie was there probably towards the end. And then in between, Scott would have been involved. And maybe, was there another?
Wendy was there.
Wendy.
Big Mac was there. Tommy Kincaid, a short spell.
And in terms of all those collective, if you're to put that on a 13-year span of you having each person, who was Eddie probably the best person to get the best out of you, or who did you believe had the best management style to manage you as a person?
Probably the best. Well, I have so much admiration for Roy Coyle, because he is the person that gave me the opportunity in senior football. And at that time, Roy Coyle wouldn't have put too many kids in. Or I wasn't a kid, I was 19, 20 at the time, wouldn't have put them in. So I'm always very, very grateful of that. Wendy Miller always showed great belief in me. Wendy Miller would have played me anywhere, but, made me feel as if I was special.
Yeah.
Alan McDonald, Big Mac, when he came through, he was the same. I always remember him, talking about when Derry said he went for me, the things that, and we all read them. You read the things that people say. We're human beings.
Absolutely.
You want to read the good things. And I remember going back in the earlier days when the Irish League forums were starting to take off when you're 19, you're 20, and you're reading them.
Running through the internet, scrolling.
And you read them when you're 19, 20, 21, because you get a buy ball.
Yeah.
Because you're 19, 20, you're young, you're inexperienced. They don't say too much bad stuff about you. And then when you get a wee bit older, it starts to creep in, and you go, I need off this.
Yeah.
So in that way, we're quite lucky in that we had that break. Now it's 24/7. People are on their phones. People are seeing Twitter. People are seeing Instagram. People are seeing everything.
You can't go anywhere without being caught. Yeah.
So Wendy was brilliant for me, and he played me so many different positions. He gave me a lot of faith. Scott Young, again, I played with Scott. I remember, people make flippant comments, and when you're young, nobody else hears them, but you hear them.
Yeah.
I remember when I was playing a reserve game, we played Donegal Celtic. The beat us 1-0 in the Steel and Sons Cup. Raymond Krangle refereed it. I'm convinced he gave a penalty, which was never a penalty, and should deserve it. But at Donegal Celtic, I must have came on after about 10 or 15 minutes and played sweeper, but I felt like it was Franz Beckenbauer-esque. I was playing an F-wing and stuff, and because it was my local team.
Yeah.
And I remember must be a couple of weeks there, I went to a Thallons club. That was where we used to go on a Saturday, and one of the DC fans was doing the door, and I remember he spoke to me, and I felt like a superstar. Yeah. A superstar. But I always remember Scott Young then making a flippant comment going, he's the future of our club. And they fill you with confidence. So I loved him for that. I loved him for that, because we're human beings. We want positive feedback. And he'll not remember. He said it 100%. He said it. And we thrive on things like that. So he was great. Eddie was super, because we won an Irish Cup. Yeah. And I got on great with him, and he had a real style of play, Tiernan and Seamus and the big chew there. And that was when everything became really, really tactical and really structured. Yeah. So Eddie was a great coach. But I was very fortunate that I played with so many brilliant managers, and I'll take a wee piece of them all. So
you got 2 league titles out of them. You got an Irish Cup. You got the last league title, which we've had a few boys on now, and they have won it since, which is crazy. Couple, maybe an County Antrim Shield was in there.
2 County Antrim Shields and 2 League Cups. So it's 7 trophies in total at Glentoran. Good times.
Good times is right.
Good teams.
Yeah.
Good teams, really, with great crack, with really good changing rooms. I remember Christmas dinners. We used to, now boys go out and they go for a party.
Yes.
And that's fine, that's great. Our Christmas dinners back then, we used to make movies.
Right.
You know, I remember Colin Nixon, myself and Paul Eamon used to go to Paul Eamon's house.
Right.
And we would have made, it was actually a day in the life of Scott Young. Scott was the assistant manager at the time, so Colin Nixon had a wee Scottish accent and we took the piss out of all the players.
Yeah.
And it was class. And then the next year we done a sequel.
Right.
So with a really good crack, with a really good camaraderie and really group, you know, I remember Gary Hamilton, one of the ones, you know, Gary had a monobrow.
Yes.
You know, so it was,
oh God, I'm still there.
It was the Dolmio ad, so we pretended that guys was the Dolmio ad. Keith Gillespie had signed, so it was phone a cab taxi plan. And we had props, we had phone a cab ordered, they came, taxi driver got out with a big bag of money for Keith Gillespie. You know, it was fun.
Yeah.
It was fun and we had a good team and we had good times.
Well, as you touched on there, you love to sing song. And after doing a bit of research, there's probably one of the only times I'll actually look at this is I've got a lot of feedback about your initiations and potentially singing in a car on the way home. You loved a certain wee sing song.
I do. I'm not going to do the impression because it sounds very different in my head, but I think Ronan Keaton and I sound exactly the same.
Yes, well, this is Ronan's the only man I have down here. With you.
And he's probably the only one that I can sort of sound exactly like.
Right.
But you know, Sean and I assume probably you've heard about it, but we actually it was in the car with Mark Hawkey and how technology advances. He's got a new company car. Mark works for Stat Sports, and they actually have now a car school karaoke on the dash. So yes, we had Ronan Keaton on the way to Bangor and Glentoran on Saturday, but Sean's a brilliant singer. Sean's the best fun. We used to sing at the top of our voice with the windows down. And Fight for Fighting Superman. That was the song.
Was it? Yeah.
Oh, I love it. I love a sing song, and more drink, the better sound.
Should have filled that water up with vodka or something, got you going.
No, I won't even go. I wouldn't go. This smile on your face lets me know. Something like that. Close your eyes when you're hearing that. You'll
really I'm so surprised. I didn't expect it, but
I know.
I'm having it.
Oh, yeah.
I can't wait to throw a Christmas party here this year and bring everybody together. We'll do a karaoke night.
3 pints of Guinness and
on the spot.
The
Christmas party. You're in.
Yeah,
we'll pay you.
At least a little bit.
Brilliant. What I want to talk to you about is just as the career goes there through the Glens, the opportunity obviously arises for you to part ways with Eddie. Linfield's next. David, the manager at that stage?
Yeah.
What's that conversation like, knowing that you're probably leaving from the January? And how did that conversation go for you, knowing DJ is obviously DJ?
Well, I'd handed in a transfer request just around about after Christmas to Glentoran because of things that were ongoing
with the money situation and
with the money situation. It was the money, but it wasn't the money. It was the principle. It was how the whole issue was dealt with, and I just didn't want to be a part of it because of how it was done, in my opinion. But I wanted to go, and the only club I wanted to go to was Linfield because at that time, yes, Cliftonville were nominating. But I thought that Linfield was the team that would bring me the most success because we're glory hunters.
You know, you want to win. There's no point being in the game if you're not going to try and win.
There's no beating around the bush. I wanted to win, and I felt that Linfield would have given me the best opportunity to do so. So I've been speaking back and forth, but I was under contract. I had another year left at a testimonial to go, but I was adamant that I was leaving. So Eddie was brilliant at the time. You know, he knew that I wanted to leave.
Yeah.
He had said to me, okay, this is what you want to do. It's not for me to decide what happens. It's up for you and the board to do, but I need your best. And at that time, Johnny, I won the league in my first real year, which was 2005, and then we lost the Irish Cup the next year, and that was the year that Linfield won the clean sweep.
Okay.
And when you win it the first time, you think this is going to happen every single year. And people always talk about being in the moment. It's very difficult to be in the moment until it's a memory, because once it's a memory, you realise that was a moment.
Yes.
So I thought every single year was going to be success after success after success, and it wasn't a long time. So I went from 2005 to 2013, and I'd never won an Irish Cup. So the Irish Cup was the one that I'd never had, and I think it was 28, 29 at the time. So it meant so much to me, and with a final against a really good Cliftonville side, but with a really good team too. And we went and we won it. So in my view, it was the best way to leave.
Yeah.
But there was still a lot to be done. And I'd agreed the terms of the contract without signing because the two clubs had to negotiate. So I remember I was in Corpus. It was a prize day. and it came through on somebody had messaged me saying, so you've signed for Linfield. But at that point, I didn't know I'd signed for Linfield because the clubs were in negotiation. So I think what actually happened was the clubs negotiated a waiver of a development fee for, I think it was Aaron Boyd at the time. So that's how I eventually got out of my contract, and I went to Linfield, and David was there, and Brian McLaughlin was there, and all the backroom staff, and we had a really good team, a really strong team. Andy Waterworth, he made the move at the same time. We were real title contenders, and towards the end of the season, we just ran out of steam a wee bit.
Yeah.
We won the Counter-Attacking Shield, done really well in Europe. We went to Greece.
Yeah.
We beat Skoda Xanthi. Over there, we lost in extra time at Windsor. So that's set up, this is going to be a really good season. And it's four brilliant years there. Again, under a number of different managers. But David was brilliant for me as they all were.
Yeah.
But I love my time at Linfield, love my time at Glentoran too.
Speaking of Greece, got a message about Sean Ward, Michael Galt in Greece on the drink with David Jeffries. Cost you a few quid, did it? Galty somehow always seems to get people fined, doesn't he? It's wild.
He's a social butterfly. He gets himself in a situation where he connects.
He needs it.
He makes connections.
Yeah.
And I think he went out for something, and I think he met them somewhere, and they were drinking, and he came back to me, and I'm quite weak.
Yeah.
At the same time, with just brilliant result, Aaron Burns scored a goal to beat Skoda Xanthi 1-0 over there. I think we were drinking Jameson and water.
David's drunk,
David's drink, and I don't drink shorts. Don't drink anything like that. But it was rightly. So then we stayed up late, back to bed, 4 o'clock. We were senior players at the time. We slept in, and the thing with David,
root mistake, isn't it?
The thing with one of the biggest things with David, in my opinion, was that the best things is you have his trust until you break it.
Yes.
And then when you break it, he deals with it. It's consequential. You'll deal with it. Then he moves on.
Well, that's what we spoke about earlier. It's never a grudge.
No. So we get on the bus. We woke up eventually. Somebody's banging the door, and we go down, and we're on the bus, and he goes, "That's week's wages," and we were going,
I dead on.
I took it off.
So bad. I thought he would have just given it up. That's just texting Michael last night, and I was like, "There's no way I'd have paid that." I'm telling you.
Well, you have to follow through. Yeah. If there's rules, and you set the rules, you can't.
It's a good team camaraderie thing, isn't it? Like the boys were loving it. Then everybody's cheering as soon as you get on the bus. You're late, and it's costing you. And
it's very transparent.
It's
you mess up, you deal with it, we move on. So that's what I loved about it.
You and Andy both move at the same time. Making that move from the Glens to Linfield, did it come with animosity? Because you were there for so long. It's the so-called Big Two. How's the reaction? I know Linfield fans are probably buzzing, but at the same time, Glentoran fans are like they fill that stadium. It's a big club, and the last thing they want is their two main players going to Linfield.
I had no problem making the move. Now, I was in the best year of my contract financially.
Okay.
I had a testimonial, but I wanted out. I wanted to go.
Sorry to jump in here, but did you get the testimonial or did you leave it?
No, I left the testimonial.
Jesus,
I didn't have a testimonial. So I left before it because I knew that I wasn't going to sign again because of how things went. But I had no problem. Growing. Now, I had a really good connection with Glentoran fans at the time, so I totally understand that they absolutely adore their football club.
Yeah.
And I can't expect, I'd be very naive and silly and idiotic to expect people to have empathy for me making the move to their biggest rivals. So I understand that. My issue was with the club, and how things went. I take the biggest brunt of it because I would have been the one that was creating the letters, creating the emails, but they were all signed by every single player. So we were all involved in this. I just became...
You were the front line.
I became the front man, the scapegoat as such for that. So I have no problem with the fans having their issues or the concerns with the player going to their biggest clubs, because that's rivalry. There has to be rivalry in football. Absolutely. And that's what makes the Big Two so special. Absolutely. Is that there is that level of hostility. I think it changed for a wee bit there. I'm hoping it's come back again because
people jumping
because you need
all over the place, and you're sitting going, it's as if no one cares.
Yeah.
And I'm like, as you say, I think it is coming back now where it's kind of getting to that stage where
it needs to be
a bit of grit, isn't there? Now,
there's no God-given right for Glentoran to be successful, or indeed Linfield, but for them to be competitive with each other going for trophies together, it's better for the league. But I went. I made the move. They weren't happy. We've spoke about this before, and I'll be honest with you, it annoys me a little bit.
Okay.
And they love the fact that it annoys me.
I'm sure they do.
I've no problem with saying it.
Yeah.
But they've actually in the social room at the Oval, they've actually taken Andy Waterworth and my face out of the Irish Cup trophy, and they put 2 fans' faces in. So it was during COVID. Actually, we were in getting changed when you couldn't go to the change room.
Yes.
And going, fuck's guess
What's that about?
We won this single-handedly ourselves, and now they've taken us out of it.
Cut you out.
So that's a wee bit disappointing, and it's a little bit annoying. But fans would have sang songs, which weren't very nice about family members.
Yes.
But I have so many people there, Philip Stevenson and David, who I met on Saturday, who have Philip was our administrator in the reserves, one of those people that make a massive impact in your life. He runs the Glentoran Legends. He's always asked me to go back. I'm reluctant to do so at the minute because I just don't want to really play as much. But you've got those people there who understand, probably hurt, but don't think any differently of you as a person.
They're football people. And I think when you're in football, you understand that sometimes people just have to leave, and sometimes people do move on to potentially bigger and better. Or sometimes it doesn't work out that way, but in your case, it did, technically. Well,
yeah,
probably fan-wise anyway.
Took away 4 years.
It did.
3-4 years. But with good times and with change, David then obviously left. Warren Freeney came in. Mm-hmm. I get on great with Warren Freeney and Andy Todd. Andy Todd was a legend. I used to sit beside him and just talk to him. He used to talk to me about playing with Thierry Henry, against Thierry Henry and his career. And his dad was a superstar. Colin Todd won the Player of the Year. But I love those guys. I thought they were brilliant because again, you can learn.
A really hard man too, wasn't he? Like even when he played the game, you were like, he's just one of those old-fashioned animals type thing.
He was strong. Sometimes when you've done the games and you wouldn't know, sometimes in a forfeit you get people lined up and do stuff, and you got to blast the ball at them. You'd have turned around and you'd have been heading them out.
Just a bit tap. You're like, yeah, you're not.
But he was brilliant, and he had a reputation in the game, but not for a million years did we ever feel threatened, or he was the nicest person, and he was so helpful and he was so accommodating. He was brilliant, and him and Warren and I really enjoyed my time with him. And then David Haley came in, and then just success, and David played me in midfield. I was coming back from Austelis Pubis. It's quite funny now because we won the league, we won the Irish Cup, we won the County Shield. And I was coming back from the SPA, so it took me a while. I think I played 31 games or something, but towards the end, I wasn't really playing. And it's quite funny because David ultimately did the right thing because he changed the team and they went on this success. As hard as that is for me to accept, but you had Stevie Lowry. Our central midfield at that time was Mulgrew, Stevie Lowry, Sammy Clingan, myself, Josh Carson. They were the 5 that were sort of fighting it out. Sammy got injured. He probably would have been number 1 because he was just Sammy was exceptional. So Stevie and Jimmy went on a run, and Stevie was scoring goals, and it was just tough to get in. But I remember we were playing Lauren the County and I was playing, and I was running the show every week. Yeah, run the show. And I remember David says to me, and he says this. He still says today, I'm only taking the advice of the medical staff, and he says to me, he says, Sean, and he says, Gaffer, he says, well, he says, what's wrong? He goes, grade 2. I says, well, I didn't talk. He says, hamstring. I says, no, I'm okay. He says, grade 2 hamstring tear. He says, no. He says, medical staff told me I'm going to leave you out tonight. Right. And that was me. That was me. I was on the bench for the whole.
I don't think he was there, did you?
Yeah, he's still following the advice of the medical team. Yeah. But it worked out because we won the league. Coming from behind, we won the Irish Cup, we won the County Shield. As hard for that was for me to take, but we laugh about it, all the time because he was he was very like Roy Coyle. I found, very, very strong. Yeah. Made his decisions, stuck by them, and he was brilliant. And the success that he has, I know you spoke about before. He'll always be doubted. Always. But he is winning and winning and winning and winning.
And I think it comes with the standard of the club. I think the club, obviously, over the years you've been there, it's like more than me, but they keep that standard as high as possible. But what gets me is whenever I'm sitting in the stand even watching the games, and some of the stuff after 15, 20 minutes because they're not winning 1-0, and the stuff that gets shouted, you're sitting going, take it easy. Like 75 minutes left to play here, and more than likely these are already top of the league. Like, chill out. But you're sitting going, like, get them out and all. And I'm sitting going, like, you win every year. Like, you win something every year, regardless. Like, even if it's County Antrim, you don't win the league, which is very rare. But I'm like, God,
they're
that
fertile.
fella.
They're fertile, but again, like Glentoran fans, they love their club.
Yes.
So you've been playing, and you get somebody from the fans on the terraces going, get Wardy on. And somebody said, Lee is on, but get him off. So that's the way. But standards are so high, and David drives those standards, and the players there. Same with Roy Coyle. Roy Coyle was so good in that, you know, he wasn't that empathetic coach, arm around the shoulder conversation. It was, he signed self-motivated players that he didn't have to motivate, because really, it's not his job to motivate a player. And I don't think really it's any manager's job to motivate a player. Yes, if you can get that extra bit out of people, and some will, and you'll have those transformational coaches. But Roy Coyle's biggest success was he signed big, strong characters.
Yes.
David Healy's trying to do the same. You
step in and manage it, just changing room manages itself, sort of thing.
And that's exactly it. The Glentoran, that changing room managed itself. Crusaders, changing room managed itself.
Yeah.
The year that we won the league, you know, really.
So you actually got the league at Linfield. You get the Irish Cup, County Antrim, as you say, touched on all three. Your time was up. You knew your time was up. And I don't know if this is probably throwing you under the bus here, but when you compare the two teams, Glentoran, Linfield, probably take on here, I feel bad saying it, but who do you think's the bigger team?
It's hard because,
and this isn't me trying to throw you under the bus, but I'm like, you've experienced both.
I've no problem answering it, because if I go to my early career,
I also don't want you doing the BBC at the weekend at the Glens or something, and then everybody's hammering you.
Listen, you can only be honest. You can only call it as you see it. 2002, 2003, Glentoran nearly done the clean sweep. They lost in the Irish Cup. You had really big characters, Michael O'Neill. They won it again in 2005. They won the Irish Cup 2004. Those early days, it was success after success after success. Won the League Cups, County Antrim Shields, Irish Cups. It was constant. It was brilliant. Supporters loved and adored their club. They had multiple supporters clubs that you all went round and visited. You saw how much it meant to the fans. There's no denying the fact that when I left in 2013, that last year was sour.
Yes.
I'm not going to let that completely change my opinion
of
the club.
Yeah.
Because it's quite naive of me. Otherwise, I would like to think I'd done well for Glentoran, but if Glentoran fans were to judge me on my last year, then I might as well not have played for the club for 10, 12 years, which I think is quite unfair.
Yes.
So it's unfair for me to judge Glentoran as a club on the last year as I saw it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they're struggling now. They've not been able to transition to be a club that's successful. They won the Irish Cup over McDermott. They won the County Antrim Shield last year. They're not the conveyor belt of success that Linfield have.
Yeah.
Now, at the same time, Linfield, an incredibly run club, but everybody is accountable. Everybody has a job. You're not really relying on volunteers. So it is a machine that just functions. You need something, it's there. First time I ever needed a scan, got a scan. And I'll tell you what happened. I played a charity game at Laurel Hill, and I woke up the next day and I couldn't get up. I had a status pubis. David Healy says to me, about 4 months later, Laurel Hill. You know, that didn't help. But I needed a scan, I got it. You know, I broke my collarbone at Glentoran. Chris Kyle, resting magnificent doctor. You know, went in the NHS in 7 days, but it took me 7. Well, sorry, that's quite silly. It might not have been that case. But at Linfield, I felt that when you needed something looked after,
it was done. Yeah. That's that professionalism work.
Can't say
that's all lined up, whether it's insurance or... I'm not saying that clubs don't have insurance, but they know that that's the way it is, and you get your scan straight away, diagnosed straight away, operations. Yeah.
So to answer your question, I'll probably still not answer it, but in those early days when Glentoran were successful, they were absolutely on a par with Linfield. The only difficulty is that because of the structures that are in place at Linfield, in my opinion, that makes Linfield
allows their trajectory to continue to
club because they're able to be the team to beat every year, and they have been the team to beat from I started playing. Every year, it's always you finish above Linfield, you more often than not win the league.
Yeah,
you know that didn't transcend with Glentoran after 2009.
See, when you do leave Linfield and you go to Crusaders, is Crusaders, I know you were there for 3 to 5 years maybe, Is that probably your most enjoyable period of time? Because I'm just trying to think back to the team itself, the squad that you had.
It's a great team.
And they were just, I think they just came off the back of winning a couple of...
Well,
you actually
lost.
No.
We pipped them on the last game of the season. Second last game, we beat them 1-0.
Yeah.
And they lost the league. So we'd won the league and then I transitioned to there. But Stephen Baxter, again, you talk about, in my opinion, and you can only ever talk about people as they treat you.
Yeah.
Again, that transformational had trust. And Stevie was very good to me. I remember at times when not so many managers, David, for example, when David just came back to the league from a full-time capacity, I remember going to him and saying, David, I can't train Thursday night of school open night.
Yeah.
And he went, can you not get it off? I'm like, no, I can't. He goes, you not ring and just tell them you can't make it. I'm going, David, I can't. It's my job. He goes, but just can you not just phone in sick or something? I'm going, David, I can't do that. With Stevie at the time, who had been immersed in that game,
he understood that people had lives.
I remember there was one little small issue and it went to him and it said to him, you'll need time off. And I was like, here, take whatever you need. Because he knew it trained really hard.
Yeah.
Physically. In sessions, I wasn't the best trainer. In terms of football, but I was always prepared and I was always ready for match day.
Yeah.
But I love Crusaders, and that Linfield team was really good, as were all the successful teams. But like Roy Carroll, again, he was very similar. I hate ice baths. I remember when I had done my ankle ligaments, when they were just sort of come up, there was one in Portadown, and I went down to Portadown, and Gary Hamilton was sitting in it reading the paper, and I drove to Portadown for 7 seconds. I couldn't even dip my toes into the ice baths. I hated them. But I remember Roy Carroll, when he came over, I had a set in the ice bath just because he told stories.
Yeah.
Told stories about the top pros that he'd played with, that he'd played against, them travelling the world to Greece and wherever it was. And he was...
And you're just immersed in that.
He was, in my opinion, and everybody will always have an opinion, that's the beauty of the game. Roy Carroll was, in my opinion, the most impactful signing in Irish League history.
Think so?
In my opinion.
Yeah.
Now, I know people will say Spike going to Linfield at the age that he did.
Yes, well.
I understand that. But I just thought that the levels that Roy Carroll brought, and he was controversial, and he tested you, and he was very clever. He had a stormed off training, but that was the longer game for him.
Yeah.
I remember the year that we ended up winning the league, he told everybody you had no balls. Whipped his glove off. Andy Wadoff does a great impression of him. Took his gloves off during the session, threw him on the floor, and just stormed off halfway through the session. No balls. Just tested everybody.
Yeah.
And that little wee...
And he had a click too, didn't he? Because people do talk about his career, and he's had anybody who plays for United in the Premiership has an unbelievable career. But I always remember him coming back, and the two. I don't think I've ever disliked somebody as a goalkeeper as much as I did him. And the two of us, I remember Ballymena, he had his big hand wrapped around my neck, ready to just deploy me in the wall, and I was like, I'm about to get chopped there. He just at half time, he just had me like that. I was like, he's about to hit me with a size 18 glove. And I was like...
And that was right, but he used to test people. His own teammates used to give Andy a hard time. But I remember when Andy scored the 2 goals to win the league at Cliftonville at Solitude, he goes on the big run, he scores the individual goal, which only Andy could have done at that time. And he would have hammered Andy. Hammered him. And I remember him running out the half-hour going, I have to love that man.
Yeah.
But he was just testing people. He was just always testing people. And he was the difference. He was the difference for that Linfield team in going on the run and winning it. But I went to Crusaders and again, just characters.
Big characters.
Strong characters.
Yeah.
Really good players, really good team, with amazing camaraderie. Jordan Owens was a nemesis because he was unplayable. You couldn't compete with him physically in the air.
He's technically way better than anybody ever lets on as well.
And the nicest guy. I remember the first night that I was there, he says, "Don't we lift carry your bag over?" I thought he was taking the piss. But he was just being nice. He was an absolute monster, an animal.
Yeah. But
he was just the nicest, most humble person there, and he was so good.
And a complete goal scorer.
Yeah, but you had so many. What a team! That was such a good team.
Whenever you were there, obviously there was Big Jordan was there. Heats. Was Gavin still there?
Gavin was there. That was
last year.
That was the trilogy.
Yeah.
That was the tactic, and that was so difficult to play against Crusaders because teams without doubt tried to play the high line.
Yeah.
Because they didn't want Jordan Owens heading the ball in the box. But Crusaders were so good at finding a way of getting Jordan into the box. and he was unplayable.
And even when he didn't, you had those two
That's
wingers who were completely.
He had the Earl and was the
rapid.
knockdowns, and that's what he passed the ball. He passed the ball with his head.
It was the best. It's one of the best things I've ever seen. It's better than it is with his feet. He heads the ball so well.
And then you'd Geordie Forsyth, you'd Dackie Cadell, you'd Philly Laurie, you'd BJ, you'd Coatsy, you'd Hard, Mark McChrystal, Craig McLean, Sean, Brian Jensen at the time. It's such a good team. Good, strong characters. And I loved it. They were brilliant fun.
You had success at Crusaders as well.
Yeah, we won the league. Again, Coleraine. Then it's close. But I think it is, well, not going historic, but over the most recent times, I think with the highest points accumulation, I think with the highest goals accumulation. Because that was such a good team. And Coleraine pushed us every single week. And I know that managers will always say when it gets to that stage in the season, we're not concerned with any other team. But we were checking our phones every game afterwards. And I remember I never really felt nervous playing games ever. But I remember we played Coleraine on the run up to that spell where it was coming towards the end of the season. I remember Philly Laurie and I and BJ would have met in Costa at Yorkgate. Mm-hmm. And I remember meeting Philly that day, and it was the most nervous I've ever felt. And I still feel it. I can still feel how I felt.
Yeah.
Because it was just that tight. And all the other league championships that I was fortunate enough to win went to the last game of the season.
Right.
But that was the one where it just could have went either way. And they went 1-0 up. And then we got one back who scored as he always does. He always pulls something back. But such a good team. You were never beaten.
You had a team there, and I think since I went there and I got to experience Paul Heatley, I don't think people understand actually who Paul Heatley is, because he's the quiet man. He doesn't really seem to go around, but he's an ankle biter on the pitch. He has the most unbelievable talent.
Yeah.
He's so quick. He's one of the fittest people I've ever seen. And he scores the maddest goals. He does the maddest things.
Wonder goals left and right.
He has so much ability, and I don't know. I think people probably do still give him the credit because he scored that amount of goals. But if you put a highlight reel together of Paul Heatley's goals, it would be an absolute joke.
Well, he's a footballer of the year, so his talent is recognised, and it's down. It's something that nobody will ever take away from him. But I would have played fullback at times against him, and he had the best defensive slide tackle. You thought you were gone, and then all of a sudden he gets the wee wraparound, and he's gone. So he worked extremely hard. Yeah. But he scored the wonder goals from left. Yeah. He scored the wonder goals with his right. He was so quick. He was a genetic freak.
Yeah.
He would have had a fry before a game. He had 4% body fat.
Dreaded.
4%. He was just a great athlete.
Yeah.
And again, a very quirky, brilliant fella.
He's so strange. The changing room, best strange.
That changing room, it's so many different personalities, so many different characters. It was so noisy. And Stevie just left us to it. Yeah. And I think that was his strength. He just let it go.
Yeah.
Let it go until something is an issue, and then we'll address it.
You move on towards Glenavon, then you get another 5. It was about 5 years, Glenavon.
4 years.
4. Do you know at this stage that you're kind of wanting to get to the end? Or are you thinking, it's in sight now, I'm kind of playing out my days, I want to go to Glenavon? Maybe, I know you said you've always enjoyed yourself, but go there, kind of enjoy the last few years and have it in the back of your head that after this, is that you done?
Yeah, I didn't want to go for another club after that. I didn't want any more than, well, it's not the 4. I always wanted 40. Okay. I always had it in my head that I wanted to go to 40. And when I did get to 40, I felt I probably could have kept going.
I think so.
But I'm happy that I stopped in my 40s. But I went to Glenavon. Crusaders was the first time that I was never offered a contract.
Right.
When I left Linfield, I was offered a deal. I get injured at osteitis pubis for the second time at Crusaders around October time, and then COVID hit. And I remember, I'd already decided that I was going to go to Glenavon, as we do. And then Stevie rang me, says, well, what's your plans for next year? So, we had a great conversation. To be fair, Stevie was the first one to ring me when I retired. Mm-hmm. So I have a really good relationship with him, and I have so much respect. So I knew it wasn't going to happen because I didn't play for the team that year. COVID hit. I was no use to them. I was 36. So it was time to go. And I'd obviously played with Gary. And I knew that he was a master recruiter. You know, one of the strongest things about Gary Hamilton is that he is without doubt one of the best recruiters that the Irish League has seen. He pulls players from the Leinster senior leagues. He pulls players from the lower leagues. Peter Campbell's come from Loughgall. Joel Cooper. He was magnificent. You know, Sykes, all those boys. He gives them a chance. So I knew that there was always going to be a talent there. And I'm not going to say we were going to challenge for league titles or anything like that. I'm not going to say we're not though.
Yeah.
Because when Mike O'Connor signed, Sammy was still there. You know, a lot of very, very good players. Matthew Fitzpatrick was starting and then obviously got his move. So I thought that, right, I'll go to Glenavon and this is still a chance of me to be in a team that is highly competitive. And we were.
Yeah.
You know, we got to the playoff. Lauren beat us. Murray Dungley, I think, scored very, very late on. So it was a very good team and it was a brilliant changing room. You know, you had a big mix of players there. You know, Doyle was there. Doyle and I clashed all the time. Doyle, I remember, threatened me one time. I was shit myself through the changing room. And, you know, I had to chirp back at him. But big personalities and we were all friends. You know, so I loved my time at Glenavon. And when I did retire, they were very good to me.
What was it like playing with Gary at the Glens and then going and transitioning and being under him at Glenavon? Was there a difference in person?
No, because Gary, in my opinion, is top 3, you know, that I've ever played with or against. You're talking about the Liam Boyces, the Spikes, the Guy Hamiltons. You know, if I go the type of player that played at their own pace, you know, there's very, very few players in the Irish League that played at their own pace. You know, Spike could control the game, so strong. Boyce was the same. You know, you could probably go Gavin White too. Kevin Braniff was one who could play at his own pace.
Kevin was like silk.
Kevin lacked goals.
Yeah.
That was Kevin's biggest problem. Kevin should have had one of the best careers the Irish League's ever had because he was so good.
Yeah.
Kevin was so good. But Gary was so good. He could play left, he could play right, he could play centre half, which he did in the later years. You know, we would have nibbled at each other, you know, back and front because I was the back and he was the front. I played with Gary, I got on well with him. He gave me a hard time. You know, sometimes you'd have hurt him. You know, I remember at Dungannon, because I would have took chances. Managers hated it. I tried to dribble out from the back and sometimes I got away with it. Sometimes I got caught and you'd have heard Gary shouting, "What I?" You know, just get it. And there was one game I played and the ball came to me and I was like a wee petulant child. I just built it and just built it and just built it and just built it and just built it. And Maggers used to be the go-between, you know, going, he loves you, and all. So we get on great. Gary was very good to me. You know, particularly towards the end, in my last year, I ended up training one night a week because I had a new job on work. It was very intense. Very young children. It was just very tough, and he was superb because he was again very empathetic, very understanding. I could go to him, I could speak to him, told me the truth. Yeah. And I always respected that.
See, whenever you compare professionalism, and you look at the likes of say DJ and Baxter and David Healy at the time, and this, as obviously you're saying about that cog, that machine, and let's win and try and win. And I know it's different because they're the so-called bigger clubs than Glenavon. But whenever you're looking over at the bench and Gary's in the stand, that always bemused me at the time. I was like, he's a manager. And you just see him standing in the director's box and you're sitting going like, that's mental. Like, and I know like as time goes, you obviously understand the person, and my relationship with Gary is phenomenal, but I always think back on like, what would that be like to be managed by him and you turn around to ask something and then you have to look up into the director's box and all the board members are and he's just sitting with his e-cig. Yeah. I'm like, that would blow my mind.
Well, Gary's unashamedly Gary. Yeah. You know, and I played with him for so long and I know that Gary's Gary. Yeah. And he'll never change. But Gary was on the phone all day, every day. You know, he worked. You know, yes, the standards were different. Everybody's standard's different from Linfield, and everybody has their own standard, and it's sort of exercised in a different way. Gary brought amazing success to Glenavon. You know,
unbelievable. Yeah.
He had 2 Irish Cups. You know, he'd qualified for Europe, became second in the league. You know, he just conveyor belt of talent year on year, from a vast pool of unknown players that became very known players. So huge credit for what he'd done for Glenavon. Huge success for such a long period of time too.
Yeah. See, whenever you're talking about getting to the end of your time at Glenavon, are you ready to go?
Yeah.
Or are you sitting going, I could squeeze out another year?
I could have squeezed out another year, but it wouldn't have been good to anybody.
Okay.
And when I went down, if I'm being perfectly honest, I trained, I was always fit, because even when I was training one night a week, I was still training, but I started getting little back issues.
Okay.
So I was able to play, but then it was taking me longer to recover. And that was difficult, and that was being a disservice to everybody. And then I was finding myself out of the team. And Stevie McDonald came in, and he was brilliant. He was very, very meticulous in how he wanted to play. He was very respectful to me. But I just felt that I couldn't give what it deserved. And I never make a decision very quickly. You know, if somebody asks me something, I'll say no. And then I'll go away and think about it, and then I'll maybe change my mind.
Over, yeah.
But, you know, priority had changed. You know, I was a teacher. I became a senior teacher in a massive school, you know, a brilliant school. Me and my wife, Sarah, with 2 boys, with Caleb and Colin, who were 5 and 2. And it was intense. You know, I wasn't getting home from work. It was just tough.
Yeah.
It was logistically difficult. And that's why I always give so much credit, even more so now, to players that have children and families when they're younger and are still double jobbing as such. Because it's not easy. And people talk about the part-time game, but it's not a part-time game.
No.
Because you prepare like a full-time pro. And when you consider the schedules, when you consider the schedules of some of the teams that it was only until I went to Glenavon that we trained 2 nights a week.
Yeah.
You know, when I was at Linfield, Glentoran, Crusaders, we were always in 3.
Monday, Tuesday, Thursday.
The schedules of a full-time and a part-time team who are training 3 times a week are not too dissimilar.
No.
Apart from the recovery which they get, which is the most important part of being a full-time pro.
Well, I think that now, and I think that the way the leagues went, I think Ballymena are probably doing 3 now. Glenavon are in 3 with Paddy. Cliftonville are 3. And when you're full-time, and when I went full-time at Lauren, your Friday isn't actually a day to train. So technically you're still, like, I know you go and you do wee 5v5s and do a warm-up, cool down, get yourself ready to go, but it's a 45-minute session, if anything, and it's probably just a gap filler just to make sure that you're on the pitch to do something. 45 minutes across the week isn't a big difference in you being full-time.
It's a recovery. It's
and you're working 9 to 5. Yeah.
It's not just the physical recovery, it's the emotional recovery, you know, the time that you can switch off.
Yeah.
Because it's so important. And the levels of fitness are continuing to increase. It's probably one of the biggest changes of the younger times. People will always say which are always better. You know, your own generation is always going to be the best generation. Yeah. It's very, very difficult to compare. The net has expanded. More players are coming from Scotland. There was always players from the south and from Scotland that are coming. But it's going to continue to evolve. And they're talking about Sunday football and things like that, and summer football, and they're all very good arguments and good opinions that have their merits.
Yeah.
One thing that winds me up is when players use the argument of, but what about a weekend if I'm playing Sunday? Mm-hmm. You know, I went out and I enjoyed myself when I was younger, but I prepared for a game of football.
Yeah.
You know, because I'm playing on a Sunday, you're an athlete now. Don't use the opportunity or the excuse of, I can't go out on a Saturday night.
Well, it's a part-time job. Do you know what I mean?
You're an athlete.
You're being paid to do something. Do you know what I mean? You're
an athlete. So I don't buy that. I don't buy that excuse. You know, we're trying to professionalise the league.
Yeah.
Everything's trying to improve. The standards are trying to improve. If you can't meet that standard, then go play somewhere else. Absolutely. You know, because that's the big thing.
I think it will get to that stage too where people will be left behind if they don't want to evolve with the league.
And as David says in his press conference, I thought he was calling me a coaster. Coaster's coast. You know, David says coaster's coast. And if you can't meet the standard or the expectation of what's expected of you or what is going to make you compete with those that are around you, then you're no good to your teammates and you're no good to the club you're playing for.
You've came to the end. You've obviously now stepped away from the game. 22 years in the making. An unbelievable career. And you've now touched on a wee bit of media work. You're in with the BBC. You're doing bits and pieces outside it, and obviously you're still working. But what's next? Like, is coaching a thing for you? Is coming back into the game in some sort of capacity that's not a media side of things something that you are interested in? Or are you just content being away for a while?
I spoke to some people, and some people said that the first year is always the easiest because it's the novelty of the time. Mm-hmm. You know, you're not training on Tuesday, you're not training on a Monday or a Thursday, you're getting home from work. It's nice to be a bit slower because when you're playing, you're doing both. Everything is a million miles an hour. It's so fast. It's you know, you're popping in the house for 5 minutes, you're back out again. Everything is just always a rush. So it's nice to be slow, and that year has been super. It's been really good. I'm not saying no, that I'll never go into coach, or I'll never look for coaching. People might not want me.
Yeah.
I'm enjoying the stuff with the BBC because it keeps me involved, and I love going to the games, and I love the Irish League, and I'm so passionate about the Irish League, and I want it to continue to evolve, and I think it is. I think Linfield are doing a wonderful job.
Absolutely.
I can't say no right now. I haven't got the commitment that is needed for it. I'm not going to say I don't have the time, because if it's that meaningful, I'll make the time and I'll find it somewhere. But no, I'm happy enough with my life at this moment in time. Things a wee bit slower. I played 22 years.
Yeah.
The kids are 5 and the kids are 2. They came to a couple of games. My wife done a couple of 5Ks and 10Ks. She comes home with the T-shirt and the medal. The kids think she's the athlete, and I'm the simple win.
Yeah. You have to get the highlight reel up on YouTube.
I'm just the blow.
All those kits.
The blow in the brings. I actually
tops.
left three kits and 3 tops in to be framed. Brand the blow in that just turns up with the kids to cheer mummy on doing 5Ks and 10Ks.
Which is
nice.
nice.
It has to change.
It's nice.
Yeah, it is.
Weirdly, it's one of the things I can relate to. Lucy's now doing the park runs every Saturday morning, and I have the child strapped to me in the harness, and I'm just walking around with coffee thinking,
yeah, she's training.
As you say, it might just be that first year blues, because I'm only obviously there at the minute, but it's nice.
It is nice.
As you say, it is.
It is.
It is
then
nice.
sometimes you play. I played a charity game just at the summer there, Ben Cushty for dementia.
Yeah.
A brilliant day. And I ran the show.
Yeah.
So I'll make it
the
back.
usual.
So
You've still got it.
I used
over 40s league now.
I used to have a joke with Galdi. Every contract negotiation I had, the manager ended up giving me more money.
Right.
So I used to say that I was I was the Irish League Scottie Pippen, the most underpaid superstar of the Irish League.
People just didn't know who you really were.
I needed an agent.
Yeah.
I needed an agent.
That's one thing that's different now too. People
totally. It's very, and in a way, it's good.
It is. One thing I want to touch on. There is a few things that I have down, and I want to just highlight these just before we go, because I don't want it to drag on. You had 4 red cards in your whole career, and we touched on this last night. But one of them was a little mix-up between myself and you.
Yeah, I think you pinned me. I was
you didn't fight it out. Just
11.5 stone wet. You torn over me. I wasn't. I think I tried to push back me, and you sort of just pushed me down. I went, shit, I'm in trouble here.
I was over the top, and I was like,
I think you got a yellow.
I did.
I think I got double a second. But at four reds, and none of them were for a bad tackle. I didn't tackle much.
No, you didn't need to, if I'm being completely honest with you.
I didn't. One was, I didn't get any red cards for Glentoran. I was sent off at Solitude. It was a last man tackle. Was somebody was about to pull the trigger, and I think it's clumsy more than anything. Got a red card there. I had a red card against Glentoran. Marcus came over the back and slid off my back. That was actually rescinded.
Okay.
They had one which I'm not best proud of at Glenavon. I think I made a mistake, and he's rounded the keeper. Can't remember. It's not gone. Alex Gawn's rounded the keeper, and I'm in nets, and he's took the shot, and I've saved it. I've saved it. I should have held it.
Did you go down holding the face and all?
I think I did. And I think that's why I'm embarrassed. I'm sort of going. I was afraid to watch it in case I did do that.
Like Stephen Taylor at the time.
But I saved it. But I was sent off in, and they scored a penalty, so it was a silly thing to do. You tell your players just let it go in if you can, and then just regroup. And then
it's instinct, isn't it? It's sort of, you kind of like, what are you doing? And then it goes, and you're like, I'll get this.
Save it.
You're saying going to keep. What are keepers doing? I could have done this.
Just save it, and roll it out.
29 goals.
Yeah.
What would be your highlight goal? If you look back over your career, 29 goals to pick from, which one stands out the most for you?
I scored a goal against Limavady.
Okay.
Now, it was in the League Cup. As I'm telling you now, I think I got the ball at my own 6-yard box. I got about the halfway line, Glentoran. I got about the halfway line, and I went on a mazy.
Okay.
And I slotted in. Must have been about 11 players. And I slotted in. And that was a good one. I scored a goal against Sligo.
Okay.
Again, 40 yards out, top corner, nutmeg the boy, top corner.
There's
no footage of any of them. No footage of any of them. I scored against Ballymena quite a lot.
You did,
but I didn't score too many goals. I didn't score. I scored 2 against Derview in my last year, and I felt like a superstar.
Yeah.
I actually the way people.
That was the truth. But then again, you're always playing at the back.
But the thing
they had to let you go, spread your wings.
You get people that do it for you, where they edit, they put the Titanic music and stuff on, but I'm actually doing it myself. Going here,
You're sitting on YouTube editing. I'll get that done.
Here, wait to see what somebody sent me.
And you're sending it to Michael and here, you never believe what somebody sent.
He's going to go with Titanic music and doing a knee slide in the middle of a pitch. And I didn't score many, but that wasn't my job. So
don't mind you talking as long as you're working is supposedly your biggest slogan from your time at Crusaders, and the boys are saying that you used to run around and shout that, but they said you kept doing this as you would be not training and counting the black balls in the pitch.
Yeah, I wasn't a great trainer in the games as such. I was always fit though, because we had a great gym, gym at TV. But yeah, what I learned, and this has come from experience, is that the way you get away from it is you deflect.
Okay.
So I'd have identified somebody, a victim every week, and I'd have made it very known. Don't mind you talking as long as you're training, and then Stevie would have looked at the person that I'm talking about, and then the eyes would have been on there, and then I'd have just sailed my way.
Sold on then.
So deflection was the experience that I learned.
Your craft.
Yeah.
You're like a magician.
Yeah, help me go to 40, didn't
it? Don't mind. That's true. One last thing is, supposedly at one stage you worked in an off license.
Did.
There's a good story that comes with you working in an off license. Supposedly, like 40 lads chased you and tried to beat you up.
Yeah, I did actually. That's true.
Yeah,
that's true. I worked in the off license top of Suffolk Road. Only kids, 18, 19. They came in to get a carry out, and I asked them for ID. I was right. I asked them and they weren't the right age. And as I was locking up, they waited for me. And they chased me down the Suffolk Road, right. And I had a carry out. And I swear to God, I sprinted.
Were you carrying your own carry out?
Yeah. The thing for somebody. So I sprinted down the Suffolk Road, and their sprinters, but must be about 15 of them chasing me after. You tried to hip up me, and I turned and sprinted. I'd never dropped the thing.
Oh, claim the fame.
I must have got
all about the beer.
They chased me from the Suffolk Road to the DC.
Right.
So they never caught me.
Oh. So you had wheels, you could run with them. You were fit.
I could run there.
You were fit.
And I think I'm shouting to see you and all.
Yeah, I did all. Yeah. What I want to do last, and I want to kind of introduce us into the games, because definitely with you have been in the media recently. You've been doing bits and pieces for BBC at the games. How do you think the league started? Well, you're living up the hype here, so you've got the likes Coleraine, big hitters paying out all the money.
But there's always going to be big expectation now on Coleraine. There's going to be big expectation on Linfield, on the clubs that are, Glentoran are always going to have that level of expectation.
Yeah.
There's clubs that are now fighting to get into the top six. Dungannon had an incredible season last year.
Yeah.
They haven't started well.
No.
Certainly no panic.
No, too early.
It's far too early. Carrick have started extremely well.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, don't get too carried away. But the biggest strength of them is that they have a lot of experience, and about blending that experience and that youth and that quality. And that's one thing about Stevie, is he recruits very well. I think Matthew Snoddy's a brilliant signing.
Amazing signing
for Carrick.
Yeah.
For his impact,
especially on that pitch. Yeah. His energy and his enthusiasm to get around. He tackles, he gets stuck in.
And I can score a goal.
Yeah.
And Danny Gibson's
started off.
Is extremely fit. Danny's another one who has invested a lot of time into his physique, and it's paying off. You look at him now; he's a specimen. He's a presence.
Yeah.
You've got the experience at the back of Jimmy and Luke McCall. You've Lecky, you've Billy Joe. You have so much talent there,
so much experience.
And then you've Glenavon who have struggled at the start, but at the same time, it's been close enough.
Yeah.
They've signed
Ballymena with a good win.
Yeah, they signed a Ballymena game, and there's these little incremental changes. Jim's went full time. Mm-hmm. They've signed a lot of very good players, and you're always looking at when that transition of clubs going full time. There's always going to be a certain number of players, top players, that can't do that model.
Yes,
but they're older,
mm-hmm.
and you have to make sure that you can look after them and keep them fit, because the best ability is availability, and if there's nobody any use to you, then there's no use to the team. So it's about looking after those older, experienced players, making sure that they're fit and they're able, and then that gives you a chance to compete for every game. But it's hard to look past Linfield.
Yes,
Larne, are always very good. Don't know if we can talk about the champions.
I think there's just been a massive change. Exclusive. Well, obviously we're not getting this out tonight, but Nathan Rooney's stepped away.
Yeah. It's probably going to be announced in BBC in about an hour or two, but we've got the inside scoop.
Yes, you'll get this on Sunday.
It's just broke. But there's change.
Yeah.
How does that impact Lauren?
Exactly.
You know, Gary Haverin,
does he go back in?
Loves his club, has always been there to sort of steady the ship. Done extremely well the last time. What happens there? And then you put it down. It's going to be very, very competitive. There's going to be teams that, in my opinion, can win it.
Yes.
And then there's going to be teams that are going for Europe. And then there's going to be teams that want to fight into the top 6. And then there's obviously going to be the teams at the bottom end that
just struggle from the work near enough from work.
That are going to find it tough. You know, Bangor had a brilliant result against Cliftonville. Glentoran lost, but kept themselves in the game.
Yeah.
Now, Glentoran were absolutely the better team and deserved to win, but they almost lost. You know, a great chance from Michael Moore, a brilliant save from the keeper towards the end, and that's the whole different outcome. So I think it's tentatively started. Nobody is running away with it. You know, Carrick aren't qualifying for Europe right now.
No. But going off it, well, one thing that I do want to talk about is it was quite controversial the first game of the season. I know 3-0 down, back to 4-3, 2 penalties. 2 penalties that I think were penalties, if I'm being honest. I watched the highlights and I watched the clips, and I don't think that you can really complain there, but I mean, to come back from 3-0 down regardless of who you are, what you are,
that's the beauty of the game. You go last year, Andrew Ryan was sent off. I actually thought it was a sending off when he followed through. So whether it was or it wasn't, the decision has been given. It's impacted the game. You will be absolutely aggrieved. You'll be disgusted. You'll be delighted.
Talking points from
whatever side you find yourself on. You know, Robbie Weir can't do much. With a hand, but he's penalised. You can't, go
You're
back
going by
and
the
replay.
word of the law, or whether
Yeah. You can't go back and replay. But one thing that did happen was, a team that is 3-0 down, that says a lot about Carrick.
Does.
Huge about Carrick.
And I think Carrick have something to be excited about this year. I think with the amount of recruitment that they've done, Stephen's done extremely well, bringing the old boys, should I say, in for experience. So
and that's
interesting.
That's one thing he always done well. He always sort of brought those experienced heads in.
Yeah.
And they supported
100%.
the talent. He's done it again. Keep them fit, keep them fighting, keep them competitive. Last year was poor.
Yep.
They stayed up by the skin of their teeth, but irrespective, they stayed up, and now they've given themselves a great position. But Ballymena done the same last year.
100%.
But couldn't sustain it.
Yeah.
I
know.
So it's early. There'll be a lot more twists and turns, as there always will be.
Which is making for exciting.
Of course it is. The landscape is changing. Teams are a lot more competitive.
They are.
Teams are a lot fitter. Teams are a lot harder.
People have the ability to beat each other,
They do.
regardless, and that's what makes it so exciting.
And there's so much talent. There really is.
But listen, thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on, mate. I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. You've had an unbelievable career. 22 years in the making, just shy of 800 goals. You'd be unbelievable, or you'd be better than spec, but 800 appearances. And mate, I'm so glad that we've got to share the pitch. We became friends. And as I say, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on here, mate.
No, thanks a million for having me. Very kind. Too kind.
The only thing is we do hugs.
Hey, no problem with hugs. There's sweat dripping down the back here. But
bring it in. That's what. Here, well, I'll get you at angle so you don't show that.
Yeah, at least we're showing where I stayed on the floor when you hover.
Putting the head down. I was just mean back then, but we're not like that anymore. So I've calmed down. Yeah. But listen, thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure.
No, thank you. Listen, I was very lucky to play with so many good clubs, so many managers, so many players, made so many friends, and. Listen, this is what football's about, creating memories, creating friendships, and I was very lucky, and I take none of it for granted.
Good. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Guys, join us next week on the On The Spot Football Podcast for yet another fantastic guest. Grew up in the markets, moved to Celtic, returned to his hometown club at Cliftonville. Didn't have the career we all thought he would, but one of my best friends in life. Look forward to seeing him.